My name is Will McElroy. I'm an associate at Union Group. We are both private equity investors and SPAC sponsors in emerging industries. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today with Sandra Fastincone from Haras and Alejandro Antalich from Biomind to talk about psychedelics and how Biomind is transforming the pharmaceutical side of psychedelics.
I'm Alejandro Antalich, CEO of Biomind Labs, and obviously we have a proven record working on public companies, on pharmaceutical companies. So our experience is on making things happen. Our format is not on a full-time basis, it's on a full-life basis, meaning that every project that we take it very seriously. And what we are doing with Biomind Labs, it's something amazing. It's something that will change the world. It's something that will change the course of medicine, the course of how treatments are designed by psychiatrists. So it will have a big impact on the new generations, and we are 100% confident that we are going to achieve our milestones. I believe the world is facing one of the worst pandemics, and I'm not talking about COVID. So I'm talking about mental health disorders. So during the last decades, I don't know what happened with mankind. I remember one of my favorite concerts from U2 when Bono said, okay, don't put a man on the moon. Let's put mankind back on Earth. And I believe that words, for me, made a big change in how I understand our living in this world. And this is something that right now I can't understand, and right now we are working very hard with Biomind Labs in order to understand that we have a big problem, even worse that a war, and given that nowadays it's incredible, but in the 21st century we are seeing things that we couldn't imagine some years before. So now we have almost 1 billion people with a mental health disorder. So that means that we are in a very serious situation. That means that people is not enjoying being alive. That means that traditional SSRIs have failed. And this is something that we need to say it without any fear, because this is the truth. So traditional pharma companies have been working, developing new drugs in order to treat these diseases, but until now, there is no definitive solution. So that's why it's so important being a psychedelic company, but focus on the pharmaceutical side of psychedelics. And I believe this is the most important differential from Biomind Labs. We bring something different, we bring something that will give all the confidence, all the safe that physicians need when they prescribe any kind of medications in order to treat different mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, addiction disorders, and so on. So given that we are on the pharmaceutical field, it's crucial to know very well how we conduct our clinical trials, our preclinical trials, our R&D, because if not, it will cost a lot, but not just money, a lot of time that patients don't have right now. So our hope, our conviction is that we need to give a second chance to patients that have lost any kind of hope.
So my name is Draulio. I've been working with psychedelics since 2006. And this partnership with Biomind offers the possibility to bring all these knowledge that we have gathered in these last years to a concrete ending, to benefit millions of patients that today does not have any opportunity with the currently available medications. There is a lot of stigma around psychedelics in general because psychedelics has been tagged as a drug. And we tend to believe that drugs are something that are behind a bush waiting for everyone that walks in front of that bush and grabs that individual. Psychedelics, on the other hand, they have a very different profile to other drugs. The first difference in the profile is the fact that these substances, they are not addictive. They do not have what we call tolerance. Tolerance is an effect in which if you use a substance today, tomorrow, if you want to reach the same effects, you'll have to double or triple that amount of substance that you use. And the next day, you'll have to use more. That is the case, for instance, for alcohol. Alcohol has a lot of tolerance. Tobacco has a lot of tolerance. Cocaine has a lot of tolerance. And as you can imagine, if you have substances that induce tolerance, it means that it is highly addictive because you have to use more, and more. In the case of psychedelics, they do not exhibit, and particularly DMT, they do not exhibit tolerance. So that means that in a great sense, it is not addictive. The second difference that there are with psychedelics in front of other substances is the high potential therapeutic use that these substances has been showing, particularly in the last few years. So we have been showing that instead of having tolerance, it has been tested and it's being tested to treat addiction. So there are a number of trials in the world that try to use psychedelics and to understand the potential of using psychedelics to treat addiction to other substances, such as alcohol, tobacco, crack, and cocaine. So these are, I believe, the most differences that we find in psychedelics as we understand as a drug, maybe switching the idea that psychedelics are more of a medication than a recreational substance.
I believe the psychedelic sector is living not so good times, but it's easy to understand why. I believe when the psychedelic sector was created, obviously there were several companies that, in my opinion, were overvalued. So too much fresh capital in a new industry that obviously didn't have the right arguments in order to navigate the pharmaceutical avenues, which are not easy. When we think that for a traditional pharma company takes probably 6 to 10 years and probably $1 billion to take a novel product into the market, we are thinking that it's a very serious sector to be in. So I believe that what happened with these psychedelic companies with these high valuations is that obviously they felt that they were on a zone of comfort. So when they started to work and to develop the clinical programs, they just focus on one molecule and probably one condition. And there is where big mistakes can be made, because it's impossible to focus on one molecule, on one drug product and one indication when you pretend to become a pharmaceutical company. So I believe this was the problem, and investors, obviously, as they gave and they inject a lot of money to these companies, what they were expecting is a big change, but in the shortest period of time. And this is something impossible in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's why probably with one participant in the industry, after releasing some results of phase 2 clinical trial with one psychedelic molecule, the results were not the expected. And there, all the psychedelic space started to sink. But if we understand that we are developing novel drugs, that we are developing drugs that must be affordable to almost 1 billion people, when we think that we are developing new drugs that must be affordable and accessible as much patients as we can, it's impossible to do it in just 1 year or 2 years. We need to think on the mid and long term, because we are developing drugs, pharmaceutical drugs. And this is something very important. And the most important thing, and now entering in one of our main differentials compared to our peers, is that Biomind Labs brought fresh air to the psychedelic space. So now we have 3 molecules in our portfolio: DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, and mescaline. We have 7 indications. We have different routes of administration, different drug delivery systems. It's very important to minimize the risks. And the most important thing, I believe, is that we have, and I can say it with all the letters, we have the best scientific team in the space, led by Dr. Draulio Barros de Araujo, who was the first neuroscientist in conducting a clinical trial on a psychedelic substance for treatment-resistant depression. And as of today, it's the only completed clinical trial where the results have shown that it's physiologically safe, there is no toxicity, and that's why, and this substance was ayahuasca, where the main psychoactive ingredient is DMT, our main molecule. And that's why I'm saying that we are bringing fresh air to the space, because we know everything about DMT. There is no other scientific team that knows more about DMT than our scientific team, than Biomind's scientific team. Dr. Draulio Barros de Araujo started to work with DMT in 2006, meaning that we have a past. So Biomind Labs didn't start it 2 years ago. It started in 2006. So the experience and the knowledge gathered from this scientific team, it's unique. And there, it's where it becomes really, really important to understand why DMT. So DMT, first of all, it's an endogenous substance, meaning that right now, in this moment, we have DMT in our brains. So it's supposed that DMT is the responsible of our dreams. What I mean with this, and I believe for health regulatory agencies, the most important thing is that every novel drug that we pretend to put into the market must be safe. And if we say that our molecule is DMT, a molecule that our organism creates and produces at any time, we are saying that our bodies are used to DMT. So this is the main pillar of our strategy, starting with a molecule where we can feel safe because our body is used to this substance. So from there, we focus also in another tryptamine, which is 5-MeO-DMT. And why we are focusing in these tryptamines and not psilocybin, for example? Because if we are talking that we have 1 billion people with any kind of mental health disorder, what we need to do, and I believe it's a must for every psychedelic company, is that we need to create affordable treatments, because if not, all of our efforts would be in vain. So what we are trying to do, for example, for ayahuasca, you require 4 hours. For psilocybin, you require 6 hours. For LSD, you require 8 hours. And I'm not counting the previous time that you need in order to prepare the patient, and then after the session ends, the integration that you need. So what I'm seeing here is that we require almost a day for a patient to be on a clinic, on a hospital, side by side with 2 psychiatrists or 2 psychologists, which means that these treatments will be probably very, very expensive. And I'm talking more than $10,000. And this is not our goal. Our goal is to develop very, very cheap treatments so we can get access to as many patients as we can, regardless the income level of these patients. And this is what we are doing, and we are getting success on this, because in the case of DMT and in one of our clinical trials that we have ongoing, using an intramuscular route of administration, we are targeting 1 hour, just 1 hour of experience. In the other clinical trial that we have in our pipeline, we are targeting an inhaled route of administration that only needs just between 10 to 15 minutes, meaning that you can go to the hospital, to the clinic, and in 1 hour you are out, and probably under remission. So this is a game changer in the industry.
We understand that using psychedelics in general as a company has many different routes that you can take. So the first route is to understand what would be the most interesting substance, because as we were talking about, psychedelics is a whole different group of substances. We're talking psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, and so on. Although we tend to group these substances in the same bucket, they have a lot of differences in regards to their effects, in regards to the effect of being endogenous or not being endogenous, in regards to how long the effects takes, and so on. So the first approach that we took is to understand that we need to follow substances that has a background on affordability. And affordability means, in one sense, that we have very short experiences. And this is one thing that these 2 tryptamines has. Both NN-DMT as well as 5-MeO-DMT, they give rise to very short experiences. We are talking about 10 to 15 minutes experience, which allows these substances to be introduced in a clinic with a profile of affordability, which is a lot better than the profile of other substances that has a longer period of effects. So once we chose the substances or the tryptamines that we were going to invest on, the second idea is which route of administration we're going to be using these substances. So the second point that we have is the clarity that by choosing the different routes of administration, we are also modulating the outcome of the effects of these tryptamines. So choose the tryptamines, so 5-MeO-DMT, very short acting, NN-DMT, very short acting. Modulating the routes of administration is also something that's very important. So we have been investing in different routes of administration, from inhaled routes of administration to intramuscular parietal routes of administration. This is another point, very important point. The third point comes from our past, especially our work with ayahuasca, that showed us one thing that's very interesting, which is the following. When we look for the patients in our trials, we also investigated some of the biomarkers that changed along with the decreased symptoms of depression. What I'm saying here is that besides understanding if these substances have an antidepressant potential, we also wanted to investigate where these effects come from. So we collected a number of different biomarkers to understand if some of these biomarkers changed together with the symptoms of depression. And what we found was very interesting was that first, the antidepressant effects of these substances, they go along with changes in inflammation, which means that the patients who changed their profile of inflammation the most were the patients who responded clinically the best. So the patients who reduced their symptoms of depression most significantly were the ones who changed their markers of inflammation most significantly. So that means that part of the antidepressant effect of these substances may come from one route of the inflammation of our inflammatory system. The second biomarker that we found very consistently changing together with the effects of antidepressant effects of these substances were biomarkers linked to neuroplasticity. So as well as the inflammation, we also understand, or we found, that the impact of these substances in depression, they have something to do with neuroplasticity. So with these three ideas in mind, we developed our clinical pipeline, which is basically a triangle. In one of the vertex of the triangle, we have the mental condition, in this case depression. In the second vertex of the triangle, we have inflammation. And the third vertex of the triangle, we have neuroplasticity. So that's why we have been investing in conditions. We have a variety of conditions in which we are testing psychedelics that are within this triangle. So we are testing the antidepressant effects of these substances in patients with treatment-resistant depression. We are also testing the antidepressant effect and the anti-inflammatory effect of these substances in conditions such as fibromyalgia, which is a condition that links very clearly inflammation in a mental health condition. And we are testing these substances against dementia, which is naturally a process that's very linked to neuroplasticity. So that builds the whole idea of our clinical pipeline to revolve around these three conditions, and in which we understand that these three conditions are in fact linked a priori. So DMT has a number of advantages over another DMT has a number of advantages over other psychedelics such as psilocybin or LSD. The first advantage is that it's short acting. So if we use DMT, inhaled DMT, we're talking about 15 minutes of experience, while for psilocybin we're talking about 6 hours, LSD we're talking about 10 hours. And that gives a big advantage if we want to use these substances in a broader number of individuals, because if we're talking of psilocybin or LSD, we're talking about a session that would last the whole day for a single patient. If we have a shorter duration of these substances, then these substances might be a lot more affordable. This is one very important point that we have at Biomind, is understanding that affordability is a big issue. There's no point in bringing these substances to a commercially available medication if these substances have to last for 10 hours for each session. If we're talking 15 minutes, the accessibility for these substances would be much greater than if we have to follow patients for the entire day. The second advantage of DMT is the fact over, for instance, traditional antidepressant medications such as SSRIs, is the fact that SSRIs, they usually take about 2 weeks in order for the effects to kick in. As for DMT, and that comes from a lot of our experience in our previous trials with ayahuasca and our new trials with DMT, is the fact that the antidepressant effects of DMT is very rapid. So we have been observing an antidepressant effect that happens already 1 day after the session, while SSRIs you have to wait for about 2 weeks. This is very important clinically, because for a psychiatrist you can imagine how difficult it is to treat a patient in which you give a medication today and have to wait 2 weeks to see some changes after that medication. In the case of DMT, you have the chance to investigate these changes already 1 day after the session.
So our robust IP portfolio is based on 3 variables. So route of administration, dosing, and indication. And this is, I believe it's another important differential compared with our peers, because we are not focused on modifying any of the well-known psychedelic molecules such as DMT, 5-MeO DMT, mescaline, psilocybin, MDMA, LSD. Our intention, because at the end, when you start modifying these molecules, at the end the results will be the same. And in our case, our expertise from our scientific team is working on these three variables. So meaning that we are protecting, and we were very aggressive over the last year and a half. So until Q4 2021, we have already submitted 20 patent applications. And this is another important thing, not just in jurisdictions where it makes no sense just to say we have XX number of patent applications submitted. In our case, we are submitting patent applications in the US under USPTO. We are submitting patent applications under PCT, so where we have access to 153 countries, meaning that we are creating a monopoly on our novel inventions. We are submitting patent applications in EPO, European Patent Office, so they are real patent applications. But as I mentioned, we are not focused on modifying the molecules. We are focused on obviously reducing the side effects on these controlled substances, but by using different drug delivery systems. Okay, so in our case, we are working on 3D printing, something that traditional pharma companies are starting to work on, but on the psychedelic space, I believe we are the first ones, the first movers in 3D printing. And why that? Because we are trying to create treatments that are comfortable for patients, because this is the most important thing. We are talking about patients with depression, we are talking about patients with anxiety, we are talking about patients with suicidability, we are talking about patients with addictive disorders, and there is where it's very, very important to have drug delivery systems that fit perfect to these treatments. So in our case, now that we have protected a bunch of our novel innovations, now we are strengthening and working on make more robust our applications. And now that we are moving to UK, so we are working with our lawyers based in US, now in UK, so there is a big chance to get this patent granted very soon. So this is our strategy on protecting our novel molecules, which is crucial to have a secure market entry.
From a regulatory perspective, what are the main roadblocks, and what is Haras doing to kind of combat that?
So it's communication. It's how so we're seeing the scientists all around the world, and here in Brazil too, we have Dr. Draulio and his team working tirelessly to bring information to the public. So they are using all kind of social, all kind of vehicle of communication, their own social media tools to bring awareness to the community, not just to the people, but to the scientific community, to the key opinion leaders, to shed some light about the psychedelic, because until now it's, as I said, all a stigma. So there are a lot of misunderstanding about this area, which is completely wrong. This class of drugs, they are very safe, given that we have the right setting, the right doses, the right formulation, because that the historical data for these substances, they speak for themselves. They're been using, they are being used for centuries now, right? So we are merely filling the caveats for the pharmacokinetics, for the pharmacology, to find the right doses, the right vehicle of route of administration. We're just setting the right path to launch this type of substance to the market.
I believe our evolution as a company was very clever and fast. So we are a very young company, but we made the right moves in order to be on the place where we are right now. So almost submitting 3 pre-INDs this year, 2022, moving our headquarters to UK, specifically Cambridge. So we will be based on the biomedical campus of the University of Cambridge, and I believe is where the knowledge since humanity exists was created in Cambridge. So this will give us a tremendous opportunity to keep strengthening our strategy in going to market with our molecules. The idea to expand our operations in Europe, starting from UK, but then to other jurisdictions, working closely with the European Medicines Agency, working closely with FDA in US, submitting these 3 pre-INDs. So we are, I believe, one of the more aggressive actors in the industry, but with clever vision on what are the next steps. So say that 2022 will be a very challenging year. Our intention to upgrade our listing to New York Stock Exchange, to get more exposure, to be able to raise more money to fund our clinical trials. Imagine that we started on jurisdictions where all the clinical research that we did was very cost efficiency, and now we are prepared to make the biggest step, moving to jurisdictions where obviously the expenses there are much higher, but now we have the required experience to do this, and obviously hand by hand with our CRO, it will be something doable, and we don't have any doubt on any step that we are taking. So our conviction is that we have the best scientific team, but on the other side, on corporate matters, we did it in the past. We know very well how to do it, but this time we are going to do it better. Because one of the things that it's very important to highlight is that the cannabis industry did almost everything well, but there is one problem. So the cannabis industry tried to skip the clinical research. And there is where we have the problem, because right now we have not enough physicians to start prescribing cannabis. And for some people, it's crucial to receive cannabis. But in the case of psychedelics, we are doing everything by the book. So we are not skipping any phase. And that means that every novel drug that will be approved by any health regulatory agency must be tested on clinical trials until phase 3. So this is the only way to convince the psychiatry community that they can feel safe prescribing these novel drugs.
The main approach that the space has been taking so far is to understand that the use of these substances have to be done within a therapeutic context. That's what people have been calling psychedelic assisted therapy. Psychedelic assisted therapy then is a model in which you have within a therapeutic protocol with a number of different sessions, like 18 to 20 sessions, with a therapist. You'd have these therapists following you for these 20 sessions, and then a few of these sessions you're going to be using a substance. So say that out of the 20 sessions, 3 sessions you'll be using the substance. This is the model that the space has been adopting right now, and this is the model that comes from the 50s, the idea of using psychedelic assisted therapy. We understand that there is another possibility of using these substances, which is to understand these substances as part of an intervention rather than a part of a therapy. So what we have been doing in our trials is to understand that we could give these substances in a very supportive way with therapists following these individuals for a short period of time. So we're talking about a fewer sessions and having that closer to what an intervention would be. With that model, you have your therapist, and at some point, your therapist understand that you may benefit from one or a few experiences with psychedelics. So the therapist would send you to a facility that has all the possibilities to give these individuals a safe and comfortable journey with these substances. So having the setup for the intervention. You do the intervention and then send the patients back to the therapist. So I'd say that this is the main difference of the strategy that we're adopting as compared to the strategy that the whole space has been adopting so far.